so wonderful for the country and for our relationship with Japan. You hope that we certainly stay away from any of that, but you also have a greater understanding for the fear in which they live of what's going on in North Korea, and that something like Mark just said could happen just even by accident.
Yeah, I would recommend that we bring a delegation from Pyongyang into Hiroshima and Nagasaki and show them what can happen.
That's a great idea.
If they'd be willing, I think it would be smart.
And China as well, because China's going to get, if we end up in major warfare on the Korean Peninsula, China is going to be the bill payer in a big way.
Yeah.
And refugees, and more importantly to China really, is what is the end state of the Korean Peninsula? Because do they want the West flush up on their border? And I think the answer is no.
Right.
And so that the North Korea has always been that buffer spring for them, and so they've got a really tough calculation to make here. How far do they go? How far do they let this brinksmanship go? Meanwhile, sort of something that we haven't talked about yet is in the South China Sea, China is building islands in one of the most heavily trafficked commercial shipping lanes in the world, and we've got so the delicate balance that President Trump has right now is how do you get China to back off and reassure Vietnam and the Philippines that those shipping lanes are going to stay open, and how do we keep those open, and then how do we get into their markets, how do we get the right exchange rates with China, and then how do we get them to help us with North Korea? It is a very complex set of negotiations going on right now.
It absolutely is, for all of the reasons that you just mentioned. You've got the economic pressures, you've got the military pressures, you've got China's real aggression to really want to be the world dominant force, and for the United States to sort of lose that ground. And so that becomes your negotiating partner with trying to get North Korea to back off on these exercises that have the whole world very much on edge. And you think about the fact, as Mark pointed out, that for the past 25 years we have kicked the can down the road with North Korea. So this president is not going into this trip as as an act of tourism. I mean, this is a very heavy weighted situation that he walks into. There has been a lot of tweet diplomacy, as Jessica pointed out, but this is face-to-face diplomacy. And I think it's also worth pointing out that he will have, in some parts of these interactions, American CEOs along on this trip as well, to sort of discuss the economic realities and the trade deals that they want. But this is you talk about the art of the deal. And this is very high stakes negotiation, as we pointed out. I just want to mention that, obviously the president enjoys the moment that he's in right now. He loves meeting people on the tarmac as he's doing. These are mostly military families that are there. You saw a lot of members of the Navy along the way. He tends to take more time sometimes than his people might like in these moments, but he doesn't particularly care. He really likes to spend the time shaking hands and taking some pictures with everyone along the course of this route, and they are enormously enthusiastic to see him in Honolulu today, which is it's just an absolutely spectacularly beautiful place, and he and the First Lady are clearly sort of soaking up this moment as they continue through it. In terms of, I see some waves now. It looks like they might be starting to move, and they'll head, as we said, to this briefing with PACOM. And just to give you a sense of what the rest of the evening looks like, there's a little bit of downtime worked into the schedule after the briefing at PACOM. Then he will move behind us to the USS Arizona, and he will lay a wreath there. Every president since Kennedy, which is when it was built, it was the memorial was finished in 1962 and opened, and President Kennedy visited just months before his assassination. But it is a very moving spot and a sort of presidential memorial ritual of sorts as we watch the president and the First Lady make their way towards their vehicle here. Jessica, obviously the First Lady gets a lot of attention as well when she travels with him on these trips. She'll be, taking part in some of these meetings. She is standing by his side for the duration of this long trip together. She's with her husband. Your thoughts?
No, I think that's great. I mean, I think that united first family is always a wonderful thing, and even presidents I've disagreed with politically had great first families, like George W. Bush, and I think that Melania makes President Trump better. And I think that that's a wonderful thing. I like seeing them together like that. And, I wanted to add, and you mentioned this in the initial introduction to the segment, but we haven't talked about the importance of President Trump emphasizing human rights on this trip. That's something obviously to be done in the Philippines, but as well with China. And I know that human rights advocates back here and certainly in the Western world will be watching to see what kind of push he gives there for the importance of, democracy and human rights. And Melania looks great.
Jessica, thank you. As always, right?
Yeah, always. She's so good
absolutely.
looking. Yeah.
I know. She's a beautiful First Lady.
Yeah.
And it's fascinating to watch this. They split off. She's going in one direction, and he is heading over to the briefing as expected. As we watch this, enormous moment as all of this begins. Marc Thiessen, General Tata, thank you very much. Jessica Tarlov, thank you all.
Thanks, Martha.
For being here and taking us through this part of the beginning of this trip. It's great to have you with us, all of you. Thank you.